thank you so much for joining us. It means so much to have you. You are the CEO of LogicMark. Tell us about the company, how you got to that position, your journey to becoming the CEO of such an impressive public company.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to chat with you today. I really came about this opportunity in a somewhat roundabout way. This does not seem like a natural sort of company for somebody with a background of working in AI, ML, and being at Audible or Google to end up at a medical alerts company. Medical alerts is what people know as, the I fall and I can't get up business. Not quite sort of where one would sort of expect to land, but landed here because, back in 2013, my mother-in-law had been wearing one of these devices and she had sat down too quickly and her device immediately went off. And in the middle of a busy restaurant in Oakland for ramen, it screams, "Mrs. Becker, are you okay?" She was so embarrassed. And at the back of my mind, I filed it in the back there thinking, gosh, somebody's got to fix this thing. And then just didn't think about it again, worked on some AI ML products, went to work for Google. And then when this opportunity came up, it was such an opportunity to try to change this particular industry, which has not seen a lot of innovation in the past 2 decades. And certainly as the world has moved on in IoT, the world has done more subscription work, all of those things. This is certainly an industry that hasn't evolved very much. And so I was grateful for the opportunity to sort of do this pivot for the company, and I'm excited to be here. So
How's it going? And what's next?
my goodness, it's been going great. It's been a hard road for 2 years. This when I inherited the company in 2015 as a CEO, we really hadn't developed any new products since 2015, and so I'm very excited that literally we are shipping our Freedom Alert Plus product. And in essence, it's actually not just shipping one product, but we're actually shipping 3 products concurrently at the same time. So in a world that we sort of live in where most of these devices are sort of picked up with manufacturers, that's already pre-developed, we actually had for this launch not just develop a new hardware product with a screen, a product that acts kind of closer to an iWatch or iPhone, where it has automatic updates so you could get the most up-to-date fall detection technology, for example. But we also developed the platform infrastructure to make that happen, and an app that goes on iOS and Android to actually allow you to contact your caretakers and for your caretakers to help, take care of you. And then also, and then a cloud backend that actually has AI and ML implemented so that we can actually do better fall detection. Because again, I go back to my sort of experience with this particular type of product where my mother-in-law sat down too quickly and tilted a little bit, and therefore, it was screaming out at her. And so we are developing a product that actually is better at detecting false positives. And it consistently learns using AI and ML so that we can actually do better, and so that not more people will be embarrassed and they're actually able to use fall detection in a way that will continuously get better the more they use it. So it's quite a lot that we're
Yeah,
developing.
and that's a challenge, right? To build both a hardware product, a software product, an AI product. What has that been like as you've been working with the team and figuring out? I mean, those are like 3 pretty distinctly different things. Like you said, they're kind of like 3 distinct products all in one here. Hardware's no simple task, and neither are the other two. How has that been? How has that worked for you? And what would you have us think as we're if there's people watching or wondering hey, how do you do all 3 of those?
You sleep very little, and that's one thing. So we were predominantly a hardware only company. And so we were really bringing experience around software development and SaaS technology development into a company that has never done that before. And so that was definitely a brand new change. And so, really, what we saw was a fairly radical change in terms of the type of leaders and team members that we brought into the company. So, we brought a lot of folks who had actually had very strong experience in connected IoT products. And so, for example, the VP of engineering and I have worked together, and we actually had built a connected car technology for Porsche, Honda, Subaru, tons of other car manufacturers I never could remember. And that was scaled in 50 plus countries and millions of cars, right? And so this is a very similar infrastructure in terms of the type of thing that we were building in terms of the AI analytics and so forth. So it's not our first time at the rodeo. And so by bringing people with experience in doing IoT work, we're bringing adjacency technology into the industry that hasn't had that built into it in the past. And so, we're operating basically like a startup with a ticker symbol, and it's been an amazing experience. So.
That's incredible. How are you thinking about artificial intelligence, both the opportunities that exist inside of kind of like this boon in this particular space? Although AI has been around for a while, as you know better than anyone, but now it's like public and at the forefront of everybody's mind, and every company's trying to integrate AI with their products. And so I'm interested in like how you think about it from an opportunity standpoint, and I'm also interested in how you think about it from a downside standpoint and the way that conversation has been going, publicly around, hey, there could be some dangers here.
Yeah, it's always a little bit funny to me when we talk about sort of the fear revolved around sort of AI. And I am a huge fan of Terminator, the movie. And so I don't think Skynet's going to take over yet. For folks who work in this particular category space, that sort of cognizant AI work, it's definitely things that people are looking at. And certainly there are folks who are developing further along those lines. But the reality of, what AI is today and where it can be is really, I think, an interesting one, because what excites me the most about sort of where AI has evolved to where we are today in 2023 is the application of AI in areas that just are very much needed. We're seeing the application of AI ML in health, caretaking, the care economy in areas where we really can use a lot of that work. If you look at where we are today, the application of AI in drug discovery, we can run utilizing AI models and sort of rapidly sort of test so that we can actually get vaccines and all of these things out faster than we ever have been able to do, right? We can actually identify what could be a cancerous cell utilizing AI applied into computer imaging, right? And so for us, and the most important piece for LogicMark itself, we love and are excited about the application of AI and ML into the category of, care and the care economy. So how do we apply, what basically when people look at AI and ML into sort of other category areas is how do we make AI and ML work for the people who are the most vulnerable and most in need of that technology? And so if you look at what's happening today, by 2040, 1 in 4 Americans will be 65 and over. And of that category of people, 1 in 4 will fall. 1 in 4 persons over 65 will fall. And so, how do we apply AI and ML so that we can actually better identify risk factors, right, for an elderly person so that we can actually forestall that fall in the first place? That's really where we're interested in sort of developing the company forward into. Today, I would say that we are developing better technology using AI and ML to basically get you the help that you need faster, trigger less false positives, and that's all really great reactive technology. But what we're really trying to do is use the data that we're, gathering and sort of helping our users with and utilizing that to actually prevent the fall in the first place. Because typically, when you have a fall, it just escalates. It gets you into a situation where you're in worse health. And so, if we can actually try to get a walker in front of you, because some of the things that we're seeing in terms of your patterns make you look like you're more vulnerable, that being able to sort of alert your caretakers, both professional and your family members, that this pattern is emerging, then we're actually going to put you in a better place in terms of having a better longevity and more graceful aging in your own home. And that's
Yeah,
what I
like
think.
I'm never like really sure what the doomsday AI people like. It's whenever it's like AI is gonna like destroy the world. I've never heard a good answer to like how, you know, because this is just math and code. So I don't know how it gets away. I don't know. It's kind of fascinating, huh?
Well, I mean, I think of it this way. So, as a woman of color, I certainly think that, a lot of when we look at sort of AI and ML, the things that people are really concerned about is there enough full human participation in the development of AI and ML by a diverse enough group of people so that it really does not become a product that is used against you, right? And so, one of the things that, I think is a classic example of, what people are talking about is the application of AI and ML looking for patterns of who you should hire, right? And the realities of that, for example, is that oftentimes it is skews very much towards one group of people or not, right? And so I think that there's a lot of fear from people to say, like, look, do we feel like we have put in enough of the right information? Do we tag that information in a way that allows the AI to sort of be diverse, imbue it with, which I would call sort of human sort of like intelligence into artificial intelligence so that it operates closer to how people make decisions, good or bad, versus one that is straight out pattern recognition work, right? And who puts in that data and how that data is tagged is often where, folks who spend a lot of time in AI and ML think about a lot, which is, the data is junk going in, then you're going to get junk results coming out. And so that is what people fear. And I can empathize with that completely. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. Um, Switching topics a little bit just around leadership, and in particular, we talk a lot about self leadership at CEO.com. I wonder what, when you hear that phrase, when you think of like self leadership, what comes to mind, and also like, what does a typical day look like for you? How do you choose what to focus on? Or do you have any routines or habits that have improved your life? That type of thing, because all of that is involved with self leadership.
Sure, absolutely. I actually am a firm believer, um, in, leading, you know, that I should be, if there's a battle, that I should be the first one in front. Your leaders are not guiding from the back. And so when we talk about self-leadership, things that are also are important to me as a leader is that, we, especially for those who work in tech, that we're really building technology with our customers and actual people in front of what we're doing, right? As a sort of center and focus of everything we do. And so part of that, and to sort of remind myself every day of what it means to be part of the human experience. And how to sort of build technology that actually has empathy towards my customers and the people who use my technology is I do something that I call one kindness a day. And so I call it the sort of love child concept between sort of Malcolm Gladwell and Buddha, and so
Mm.
Buddhism. And so it's kind of a weird thing, but when people talk about Malcolm Gladwell, this idea of like, you have to be practicing the violin 10,000 hours in order to be a really, really good violinist, right? And so when I think about basically practicing empathy and kindness and how to basically make that the forefront of everything that you do from a sort of leadership perspective at work and just being a human being, it means that you really have to practice the kindness muscle every day and do it with a consciousness of doing that every day in order to get better at it and build that muscle. And so I do that one kindness practice a day, which means that every day I wake up and I think about, what is, I'm going to try to practice and doing something kind for somebody. And that could be big or small. And not expect anything in return because the world that we live in shouldn't be a quid pro quo at all. Right. And
Hmm.
so, how do we basically build empathy and kindness into our lives and, build sort of that circle of opportunity so that when we build that, it also causes other people to want to do a similar sort of experience. And in a workplace, I find that by building that, for example, it allows people to sort of want to collaborate more together because they're not looking for, hey, if I do this for you, like you owe me something in return in a work environment. Because really, as a company of what we do, which is to basically help the sandwich generation take better care of their loved ones, then really what we're trying to do is to build a compassionate technology for people. So really, we shouldn't be thinking about, what can I do for each other to get ahead and move ahead. We should be thinking about how do we, make things better for our customers. And so we try to put that into, so doing that practice every day allows me to do that in my personal life and also practice that in my work life. And in that way, we've, for example, looked at things like implementing via HR, ways to gift each other and to say a thank you, for somebody who went out of their way to do something great for you at work, because even though it's not part of their job, because they just were trying to do the right thing. And you can't gift each other in your own department. You can only gift people who are outside their, your department and doing something that's really out of the norm, that's out of their job, spec, but they just did it out of the kindness of their hearts. And so we actually help our employees actually gift that to each other. And it's not a lot, it's, $20 gift certificate for Amazon, or something of that nature. But what it does is it creates, and what we hope cultivates, an environment where wanting to be good to each other builds an environment where it helps us think about being kind, overall to each other and also to our customers as well. And it's a very, very small cost, but it actually creates a tremendous sort of work environment that actually, I think helps us result in better ROI. Just kind of an added benefit is what I've seen. So, but we didn't kind of ask for that. We just wanted to build an environment that we think is the right thing for building products for our customers.
How do you decide where to spend your time each day?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because if I really just wrote everything down, like I feel like I would have a list of, 60 things and I get super, super overwhelmed. And so the way that I think about, what to work on every day is I think like most CEOs that listen to your podcast and folks who listen to this great podcast is what is literally the thing that's going to make the single most impact for the day in terms of helping the company, helping our customers, and helping our employees. And so what are the three most impactful things I can do today? If I look at the list of things I need to do in one day, I really go through this list and think, what are the three single most impactful things? Because if I'm honest with myself, I can 100% deliver on three top things and then maybe deliver on maybe 75%, 80% of the other things, right? And so, and some of these I kind of had to whittle down, but I do try to focus on trying to accomplish like three sort of significant things a day that will make those impacts, and always again focused on what is going to be really impactful for my shareholders, my customers, and my employees.
What are you reading these days, or what reading book recommendation would you give to our community?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I am one of those people, I'm not going to lie. I am reading multiple things concurrently at the same time. And so I am reading a few things that I really enjoy, and some are I'm rereading as well. So something new that something that I've read before that I'm, rereading, is Nudge. It's by Richard Thaler.
Hmm.
And so it talks about how you can put sort of behavioral economics and things in place and help influence how you think about sort of, you know, things being done for your customers, the environment that one needs to be in, and all of those things. And so it's just a very interesting book about sort of, he calls them like nudge units. And so it basically does like it's sort of done by behavioral scientists in every part of the economy. I think my husband being architecturally trained, they talk about, where exactly do you place sort of like recycling cans so that in an architectural environment or built in certain things to sort of cause the behavior that you want to see. And so certainly, nudge is something we think about, like how do we build our hardware products and software products to basically push for a behavior that we hope to see from the caretakers and the folks who are being taken care of for the products that we are building. I think that's one thing. And then one that I am just starting to read that I quite like so far is Leaders Eat Last. And so it's really about, and he uses examples about, and I think the reasons why he used that term was that, basically officers in the military eat last because they want their troops to be successful and let the troops eat first. And so, how do you be a better leader in terms of helping your team and helping your business succeed as a leader? And so that's been sort of a very interesting read because it talks about how why some teams, sort of pull together better versus not, using that sort of framework. And so that's been really interesting as well.
Is that
So
Simon Sinek who wrote The Leaders Eat Last?
yes.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know that I've read that, but I've definitely heard of that book. That's super interesting. Is there a singular experience or moment that you can point to where your view was changed of what it means to be a leader?
Hmm. Yeah, I think, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, throughout my career, I've been through a heck of a lot of startups. And so I think some of the hardest things that one has to do is that when you're a startup, you really hire people. In many ways, when you look at startups, people hire their friends to build startups. And so, but it's also it's both sort of the pluses because you have second hands with each other and you understand how each other sort of think and operate in many, many ways. And so it makes you run faster and be better at what you do. And so that's why you see a lot of startups that actually are typically built by a team of people. But what also I've learned is that that is also one of the major points of failure. Because if you look at basically why startups fail, a lot of times it's about basically what we call founder divorce. And so you don't start a company with people you don't love and like and want to spend buttloads of time with because hell, it's like sometimes you spend more time with your coworkers than you do with your spouse, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, but it's also exactly sort of what rips those, relationships apart. And so I would say fundamentally, one of the hardest things I've had to do was to basically let somebody on a leadership team go that had been a friend of decades, right? And so, not because I didn't think that that person was, an amazing, amazing individual that I admire and love and think is, think the world of, but because fundamentally that fit for where the company is going, the vision of where the company is going isn't a good match. And you won't really know that until typically you bring that person on board and you start operating together and you start working together. And so one of the fundamental things I learned is that, you can't, you can sort of what you can't do, you can sort of build a company on that and but you can't actually as a leader, you know, make it difficult for yourself to say like look because this person's a friend you can't let them go. I mean, I think you have to do it with empathy, you have to do it the right way, you have to do it with compassion, but fundamentally one of the biggest challenges is that when you build a startup, like you typically like everybody you work with and but not everybody works well together, right? And so that's typically the hardest thing that any leader needs to do at a startup environment and the thing that's the hardest thing to do. And I think that it's one that we are all constantly learning and making a decision on how much faster you can do it and how well you can do it in terms of like having some level of compassion to ensure that, that sort of separation is one that hopefully is graceful for everybody involved. But
In
that is
some
a
way,
fun thing
yeah.
to do.
In some ways, it seems like you're talking about the subject of culture, and I wonder, how do you define culture within LogicMark?
Yeah, like I think, I came out of the tech industry where, I will honestly say I think I started at Wire Magazine in the early days. I may or may not have slept at work and done my laundry at work and ate 3 meals a day at work. That was the early days of the 20s, and let's be honest, I didn't have a washing machine and the company had one. It was great. So that was a company culture in itself. And, I left to go to Audible, and, and we went to Google, and they all have extremely strong cultures where the bonding occurs along the lines of, hey, every Thursday we have, cocktail hours with each other. And then you're sort of bonding over that sort of shared experience. And as I've sort of grown as a leader, what I find is that, like, when we talk about culture, it's about, what kind of grace do you give each other and the team members to each other? And so, how do you sort of treat each other um, in your company? And what is the single most important things that matter to you? So, for example, I find it very difficult, I think, for some companies that talk about bonding and how important things are. And somebody in the family of a team member is in an ICU. And somehow the leader thought it was okay that they must join that call. And my question is fundamentally, who wants to be at a company and a culture that basically says your family is not important to us and you're not important to us as a person because that's really an important part of your life. Um, you know, what we really need you to is just show up for that. Right. And so you can spend all day long talking about how you have great culture, but it's how you treat people individually, when they're in a very bad situation, either personally or professionally, and how do you help them grow and how do you help them surmount that? And sometimes the reality is that, that person has so much fundamental issues that maybe they just aren't going to be right for the company at the time. And so you need to be able to sort of see that and say, maybe you can't be a good hire for us because your, situation isn't not compatible. Right. Um, but the reality is that, again, most of the time, we all have a little, we show each other grace all the time and we respect each other. I always tell people at my work, I'm like, please don't check email, you know, if you and honestly, if you cannot help it because it's like compulsion, know that like whatever email I sent you, the only thing that I would ever say is like timely. And so if I really need you, like if it's some kind of like the warehouse is burning down, I'm gonna call you and you won't be getting an email from me. But otherwise, I will mark something like timely and I might say timely, like please look at tomorrow morning, because I know some people, like we live in a world where we're all trigger happy with email and the internet. And so you compulsively check email. Um, but I don't want them to have to deal with it if they don't have to. And I always tell people, I'm like, there's not going to be an emergency. I'm not a doctor. You're not a doctor. There's no sort of beeper here that we should be traveling to because somebody's dying, right, without us. I think people just don't operate that way for most tech companies. And that's, respecting other people have family lives and, a whole other world that you don't live in, hopefully that you've provided them the space that they can live in that world without you. So
What were those days at Wired like?
amazing, wonderful, a charge for a 21-year-old. We were building new things, breaking ground, like launching new products and experimenting all the time. What an amazing sort of experience to have as a young person. There were no boundaries. People didn't understand what you can't and can't do. So you sort of experimented with
Mm-hmm.
tons of stuff on the internet. Um, I had an opportunity to work for a traditional publishing company or this cool company called Wired on their online thing. And I opted to go to do this really cool thing called the internet. But my parents couldn't understand what the hell it was. And so they were like, you're going to turn down Disney? Like, that seems crazy. And it was just a single best decision I could have made. And, you walk into an industry where basically your bosses are maybe 3 years, 2 years older than you, and they don't know what they're doing to you. And so you're learning on the job together, right? And they're allowing you to experiment and do anything that you think makes sense without harming people, of course. But you're learning. And that I think is a wonderful experience and one that I would wish for every, person graduating, the opportunity to sort of do tons of different things and learn.
And then you left there to go to Audible, right? And you were part of building the first Audible app. That must have been incredible. And did you ever think that it would be as big as it is now, or podcasts would be as big as they are now, or audiobooks would be as big as they are now?
Well, so I didn't go from going to Wire to Audible. I've had tons of little companies, grad school in between. But I always am a little bit like Warren Buffett that way. I invest in things I like. And when you talk about being an employee or anywhere, you're investing what you love. And I loved audiobooks, whether or not it's in a CD or a tapes, right? People still call it, like I think back then, like books on tapes of all things. And so it was amazing. And I always will go back to when I think about, hey, who's given me a chance to do something that I, again, would have never thought I would have done. I go back to Don Katz, who's the CEO of Audible. What an amazing leader. I think my interview with him went thus. He's like, so do you know anything about mobile? Now, this is back in 2000, I want to say five.
Mm.
35% at most of Americans had a smartphone, and it was typically like Windows, like mobile or like, BlackBerry, right? So he's like, do you know anything about mobile phones? And I have one. And I was just like, well, I have one, but I don't know very much about, anything like developing for it or like the economics of it or anything. And he's like, do you think you could learn? I'm like, yeah. He's like, you seem pretty smart. So tag you're the director of mobile. And so I walked away thinking like, wow, this guy is crazy, but I'm not going to tell him otherwise. I was probably a little bit scared, but excited. And yeah, developed the first mobile app in 2005 for Audible. I think I see a lot of the features that I actually sort of originally planned and spec'd out. I was the first director or first person to touch mobile for the company as a product and marketing person. Worked with a team of amazing engineers and yeah, launched the first app for Audible. And now I listen to it all the time as well. So I'm a believer in eating the dog food that I make, right? And that's very much sort of on par with, you have to work on things that you really fundamentally have a belief in because as a CEO, you are the chief, evangelist for your company.
I want to go back to your answer on culture just real quick and double click on something that you mentioned, and that like the word that kept coming to my mind as you were talking about that is empathy. Like having empathy for the people you lead and having empathy for the people you work with. What role do you think empathy plays in leadership, particularly at your level?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, one of the things that's really difficult is that, we as leaders, lead by example. You have to lead by example because people are looking at you to make decisions, to sort of model after, and so forth. And so, one of the things that's very difficult for a lot of type A personalities who are CEOs is that we have very little empathy for ourselves. And so, it's very difficult to model empathy if you can't have empathy for yourself. And so, one of the things, I talk about, in a work environment, for example, is to say, like, be the first to sort of say that I screwed up. I think I might use more strong terms like, oh boy, guys, I effed it up. And so saying like, I totally screwed this thing up. And so because of us, because of me, we might have had a delay of 2 weeks here. And saying like, this should have probably not been done. And that this is how I would do it different this time around, the next time around. I would, do this and do that. And so by staying basically and showing myself empathy, like I screwed us up and I'm delaying us by 2 weeks. That should not have happened. And here's what happened here in terms of a postmortem. And so here's how we don't do it like the same way. That means, and that means that I'm okay with that. And then that means that other people should be okay about doing that too. Right. And so you really have to, like, when you talk about building empathy as part of a company culture, it doesn't mean that you're slacking. Right. The reality is that like everybody's, I'm a firm believer that really everybody wants to do good and do right, right? But we beat ourselves up tremendously. And so we get into this spiral of like recrimination. And then actually what that does is screw yourself even more and delay things even more. Right. What I really love to see from an empathy point of view is to sort of give yourself that empathy and grace to say, like, screwed up. Here's how I screwed up. And here's how we need to do to fix it. And here's what we need to do to not do it again and move on. And I think that's like the number one issue for a lot of companies from an empathy point of view, is that because everybody's doing this, right? Oh my
Hmm.
gosh, it's not me, it's not. And then so you spend a lot of time trying to figure out like what happened here, right? And so having empathy for myself and then having empathy for my coworkers builds a culture where we're not doing hopefully too much of this. I mean, I'm not going to say everybody's perfect. Like we sometimes all do that, right? But to sort of remind ourselves and as an empathetic leader, and trying to set company culture to say, this isn't how we should operate. It's okay to say, like, hey, this is me. I screwed up. And then by doing that, we also have more empathy for our customers because we really can't expect our customers to be perfect and do things the way we want them to. Perfect case in point, my previous company, Looky Loo, we developed technology that allow people to sort of use in a social environment, um, like help people make, you know, clothing selection, right? And one of the things that we talked about is like, how do people really like want to make clothing decisions and find the right size. It's a reality is that they don't want to like strip naked and scan their bodies with a little, scan on their phone and then upload it to a server so like a bunch of like software people can see. And that was the expectation of one of our competitors, or actually several of our competitors, right? Which is like, so this is the only way we can see the shape of your body and then we can help you find clothing better. I'm like, let's have empathy for our customers who are women and they do not want to have half naked pictures of themselves sitting on a server somewhere. So, what is the thing that they do the most and that they're comfortable doing? And then, how do we build a technology to solve the problem that they need solved without actually forcing them to do things that they don't do and don't feel comfortable doing? Right. And I think
Mm.
that's a different approach in terms of being empathetic to your customers to say, like, really, like, you're like, why are they being so stupid? Like, why can't they just scan their body? It's the most accurate way to do it. Well, okay, come on, right? Like we
Right.
should have empathy for customers, even if they have a perfect body, everybody's shy, right? But we don't typically think this way as technologists. And so we develop technology that basically like helps look at sizing, that we can make a good estimate on sizing, using clothing selfies that, Gen Xers and Gen Zers are sending to each other, right? Hey, how do I look in this? Right? They're already sending that. And, how do we develop the technology so that people can't say mean things? They can only say nice things to each other because
Mhm.
nobody wants to hear bad things, right? But, how do you use natural language to parse out so that you could basically, take the most important positive things to help people make better decisions versus basically saying it's a free for all, right? Good or bad. So you build technology that's again putting people in the forefront, having empathy for your customers and your users, and that hopefully always results in better technology and better customer adoption and better market fit. So,
As a public company CEO, it must be interesting that you have to think about things even outside of your company. Like you have to think about the macroeconomic environment. You have to think about the state of the world. You have to think about, I mean, for you in hardware, I imagine you have to do a little bit of supply chain issue type things like that. What is your current, I mean, and I don't have, this is just an open ended question. What are your thoughts on the current macroeconomic environment and general state of the world?
wow, so that's a really big question. Um, how's this? The market is just very difficult. Public market, private markets. I do some work investing LP money into venture capital funds on behalf of a big corporation, privately held corporation. I'm their LP representative into venture capital funds. Sort of, I call it my nighttime, like 2 a.m. job, right? So I look at the market a lot from a private equity venture capital perspective, as well as the public market sort of equity, how does a, how good is the market right now as a public company? I think that, we were due for a course correction in terms of, the market. There was a lot of enthusiasm, not to sort of date myself, but this isn't the first sort of boom and bust I've seen, right? I'm old enough to have seen sort of 1.0 and 2.0 sort of come and go. And so it doesn't scare me. And perhaps it's just a little bit scarier for folks who are sort of newer CEOs and younger to the market and, seeing their first sort of challenging economic environment. I mean, certainly, I think for a lot of companies, it's COVID really taught us quite a lot about, what does it mean to be reliant on, certain countries, the dependency on the supply chain that you have today. And so we learned, for example, to try to diversify our supply chain. So for us, for example, we had, a manufacturer in Hong Kong, we had a manufacturer in China. Um, when the shutdowns occurred for COVID, it really worried us tremendously. It made us think about, look, there's a 25% tariff on things that are shipped from China because I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. That's so for Hong Kong because it's you know, a country that's not of concern, but how do we diversify our supply chain so that our products can actually get to the customers that need them? Because we really take fully the responsibility of knowing that, because there's 1 in 4 Americans that's an elderly person, and we have to make their, you know, independent living safe. then we really don't want to see a cessation of, supplies to our customers. And so that has actually had us, for example, look at, starting a relationship with a manufacturer in the US as well, which I think coincides quite well with, this country's interest in trying to do and bring back more manufacturing and technology manufacturing back to the States. And so we're really quite aligned to that as well. And so that's been a positive. So from a macroeconomics level, I think that, some of these things are positives. To see sort of that movement of, manufacturing back to the US is a really big positive. And I think that, that sort of what we're seeing is a bit of a market correction. There was a lot of enthusiasm in the market. And I think there were a lot of people in the market that didn't, really understand the fundamentals of some of the companies. And so, if the sort of correction in the market takes out people who probably shouldn't be in the market in the first place, then that may be a positive, right? You really want people who are strong and smart and, interested investors, because really you want them to invest in your long-term growth in the company. So I don't know if I see it as a negative, but do I think, my CFO would have a different answer for you? Absolutely.
I can't thank you enough for joining us. Seriously, this has been an incredible conversation. I want to be respectful of your time, and so we ask every guest the same question at the end of every interview, and that is, like, we believe at CEO.com that the chances we give are just as important as the chances we take. I wonder, when you hear that, who comes to mind that gave you a chance to get you to where you are today?
That's a really a great question. So thank you for asking that. I actually would say that, it's two people that I actually see. And I can like three people I can name names on. One in the early part of my career is a gentleman named Bill Holtzman. I think I was an early young employee in a pre-IPO company, and he was the one who really pushed me, because I was chasing, money, because, my parents were like, hey, you need to be able to support yourself, right? So, and I had an offer to go to a larger company, but less stock. And he was the one who really taught me, like, hey, invest in yourself. And, going to a company that's a startup is an investment in yourself and learning. So I really credit Bill for that. I really credit Don Katz, who I spoke about, for taking a chance on a young MBA student who knew nothing about mobile, but was the kind of leader that was not scared about hiring people who didn't necessarily have domain knowledge expertise, but he like to hire smart people. And, he believed that if you hire smart people, they're going to do great work. And so what a wonderful sort of selfless leader and, amazing, courageous leader to sort of do that. And finally, as somebody who sadly is no longer with us, I worked for an amazing gentleman named Robert Acker. And so Robert was, somebody I learned a lot about in terms of being an empathetic leader from. He was a person who led by example, who knew to like when to push and when to encourage, and also when to be honest and tell you that, you need to work a little harder to get to the next step, and never sort of, you know, try not to mince words, but, have often been sort of gracious about how he sort of led his team. And it was through him that I also learned about a little bit of, not so much about, because this is such a horrible word as a woman. We always get asked like work-life balance issues, right? And so here was an example of a leader who, quite honestly, was a male leader that one would expect to be living and breathing at a tech industry, that basically showed work-life balance, right? And he led by example, and he told us it was okay to do that, and exhibited that kind of amazing sort of skills as a leader to sort of encourage us to do, and not be afraid to do that. And I think, he was very influential in helping me sort of think about and how to build a more empathetic team.
Thank you so much for joining us. Seriously, it's been a real honor, and best of luck with everything. And I'm sure we'll talk to you down the line. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity.